What's up, YouTube? And welcome to the next episode of my Collecting Goals series. Today we're going to talk about some subsets that I've recently put together for all the light gun games for the Sony PS1 as well as the Sony PS2 in North America. We're going to take a look at the guns that are needed to play these games first, and then I'll go into all the games that make up these subsets. Really, we have an interesting combination of peripherals that you need to play these games, as well as some other startup costs in actual hardware to get this whole process rolling. So one of the very first things you're going to need to play PS1 and PS2 gun games is a CRT TV. That can be a barrier that is too much to cross already for many of you who've already switched to flat screen technology and don't have an old tube TV laying around. Unfortunately, these guns do require that to function, so that is one of the things you'll need to get started if you're interested in getting after some of these gun games. Some of these do work with other peripherals like the mouse and the D-pad on the controller, so some of these games you can play with other means, but if you truly want to get the best experience, you will go with the CRT TV. The other thing that's pretty interesting about this generation of light gun games is we are well beyond the technology of the Duck Hunt NES Zapper by this point. The accuracy of these guns is much more accurate than what you would have seen on some of the other retro consoles that came prior to the PS1. So you've got a nice jump in technology while still retaining the need for CRT TV that these generations require. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll take a look at the hardware first, and then we'll move through all the games that make up these subsets. First one of these we want to talk about is the original gun that came out for the PS1, and that is the Konami Justifier. And this was a fully licensed accessory by Sony that Konami developed to primarily showcase their games that were for the PS1. But then many other developers started to make games that support this light gun as well throughout its life. One of the things you'll notice about this gun, first and foremost, is it is very, very green. Even more so than it probably appears on the box. It has a nice form factor to it. It's not too heavy. And overall, you've got a couple extra function buttons here. You've got a nice little start button on the side. You've got an action button here on the back, as well as your trigger. The accuracy of this is not quite as good as the next gun we're going to take a look at, but it does still do the job for primarily the Konami releases for the system. So another thing I'd like to point out just on the design of the gun, Konami even got their branding on the Sony plug for the PS1 controller, so I thought that was kind of neat. But overall, the Justifier is a nice quality gun, and it's going to really be necessary if you want to play some of the games that we take a look at in this video. So the next gun that we're going to take a look at is probably the more popular one. This came out after the Justifier, but this is the Namco GunCon I, and has this nice gray look to it. The GunCon I really improved the design of the Justifier in a couple ways, in that it has just action buttons on both sides of the gun, which enables a couple other gameplay options. You've got a really nice trigger feel on this one. It even has like a thumb cutout here to rest your thumb in. Very comfortable gun to hold. The other thing, though, that really makes this gun much better quality is that it hooks directly into your video in on the system and the TV, so that it makes a really pixel-perfect connection as far as the accuracy of this gun. And that was really revolutionary technology by Namco at the time. Nothing else had really done that by that point. But overall, this gives you a much better experience for the GunCon games that this supports. So we'll talk about those here shortly. The other things I want to talk about, though, is what else you need to get this gun up and running on a modern hookup with a CRT TV or PVM or however you want to hook it up. So you're also going to need a couple other things. And one of those is a component yellow AV, I guess, or composite yellow AV pass-through. This enables a couple things. If you want to hook up a couple GunCons at once, which a few of the games do support, you can plug them into the female connector and then loop them all together, which is nice. But this also will serve a purpose here with this other device. This is another Sony first-party device. I think it's called like a, I don't know, AV pass-through. I'm not really sure what the technical term of this thing is. AV adapter is what it says on the back of the casing here. But this is really necessary if you want to use anything else but composite to play your PS1 games through using the GunCon at the same time. So it has some nice inputs on the side. It has a composite pass-through on one side. It has an S-video in on the other. But ultimately, it does pass through directly with the AV multi-out on one end. as well as the other end. So basically it lets you hook up your GunCon into the composite yellow AV in while still using this as a pass-through for any video source that you would like, be it RF, S-Video, RGB, whatever it may be. So this is something that I think was included in the box with the GunCon in Europe, but in the US you had to buy this as a standalone accessory. And this is the PS2 version technically, but the PS1 is the same, only it looks gray. So either one you get will be necessary to play that. And then the last gun we're going to take a look at is the GunCon II. This is what you need to play the PS2 GunCon games, and this is backwards compatible with a couple of the original GunCon games as well. Really, they just did some nice refinements to the gun. It's a little bit lighter. It's bright orange now, which I don't know if that's an improvement. You've got select and start buttons on the side. You've got an action button here, action button here. But really, what makes the big difference with this one is you've got a full D-pad on the back of the gun. And a few of the games actually let you do some adventuring while playing the GunCon 2 with the D-pad. So it's kind of nice to have that feature. Really opens up some more gameplay possibilities. Trigger action on this one is nice as well. Very comfortable to hold. It's a little bit lighter and less bulky than the original GunCon, so I like that too. And I think overall, if this supported all of the 3 different gun types, this would be the perfect gun to go with. But unfortunately, to play all these games, you're going to need all 3 of these. So that's a little bit about the hardware that's involved to play all these gun games for the PS1. Let's talk about the software. And we're going to go through 2 subsets here. The first one of these is going to be all the PS1 Light Gun games, and then we'll move into the PS2 Light Gun games. I'll try to notate which gun you need for each. Some of them are actually compatible with both or all of the above, but it really just depends on what game we're talking about here. So we're going to go through these alphabetically. The first one of these is Area 51. This is a pretty well-known Midway arcade title. Not really one of my favorites. I've played it in the arcade quite a bit over the years. But it's pretty generic. It does the job for an arcade shooter, but overall it's not one of the best on the system. This one also does support the mouse, so like I said, some of these games you don't have to play with the gun, and you can use some other peripherals to play these games, even on a modern TV. So if you're interested in that, it does have that option. But overall, this one is one that you need the Justifier gun to play. It does not work with the GunCon. We'll move into another arcade title. This one is Crypt Killer. This one is a first-party, or not first-party, it's a Konami-developed game. So obviously it was intended to work with the Justifier, which it does. And this one is kind of interesting. It's like a, I don't know, like a zombie tomb raiding game, I guess would be the best way to put it. Has some really interesting enemies in it. A little bit crude on the graphics, I would say, but overall it does the job as something unique. This game had a really interesting title in Japan. I think it was called Henry Explorers. And I don't know if it was like intended to be a play on Indiana Jones or what, but overall we got this game as Crypt Killer, which I guess was more appropriate for our audiences. So another good game, plays with the Justifier if you're interested in that one. This next one is actually the last game that I got for the subset. This is Die Hard Trilogy, and what made this one kind of unique for me, why it was difficult to find, is this is the first pressing of the game. There is a much more common greatest hits version of this game that I see everywhere, and for some reason just to find a first pressing of this was really difficult. So your mileage may vary. It's not a very expensive game, but if you want the original press, you can. This game came out on the PS1 and Saturn, and it has quite a few options. As it is called Die Hard Trilogy, it actually has 3 games in one, and one of the games is a light gun game. So that's the one that you would use the Justifier with, and then this game also supports the mouse. Not really the best. I mean, I've played a little bit of it now that I got it, but I didn't really think that this is an essential piece of the light gun set, but nice to have regardless. So then we move into the sequel to that. This is Die Hard Trilogy 2, as if that isn't a convoluted enough title. This one is Viva Las Vegas. This one came out a little bit later, and really a similar format where you've got some different gameplay types included. One of these is a light gun game. This one has actually a lot of options. So this one you can use the mouse on, but this one actually supports both guns. So you can play this with the GunCon, or you can play it with the Justifier. It's pretty unusual in that it lets you do that. This one plays a little bit better than the first one with the guns, but I've really only played it with the Justifier so far. So I need to play it with the GunCon, see how it compares, but I thought it was passable. Next we'll get into probably one of the more difficult ones to find of this subset. This is kind of a part of 2 subsets that interest me. Not only is it a GunCon game, but it is also a working designs title. And this one has beautiful artwork on the cover with that reflective cover, hologram type stuff all over it, whatever you want to call it, and really just a beautiful artwork game. This one has a same developer as one of the other games we're going to take a look at later in this video, called Alpha System. And Alpha System primarily was known for their shooters, as in space shooters, but this is actually some light gun games they developed at the same time. This one has a nice, deep storyline to it, some interesting RPG-ish fantasy type stuff going on, but really the shooting is very good quality. This one works with the GunCon and supports it very well. They also had some interesting stuff that happened when this game came out. There was a contest where you could win a gold GunCon in a military-grade case that it came in. It was a very, very expensive item to get today, if you could ever find one, just because I think there was only 1 or 5 winners or something like that. Very rare, collectible to have, but regardless, this game works good with the GunCon. This is not my favorite of the gun games, although I know it is one of the more expensive ones, but it is a pretty fun game to play regardless. Next we'll move on to, again, kind of one of the later releases for the GunCon, and this is Gunfighter: The Legend of Jesse James. This one is kind of unique because it's a American developer, or French developer actually, I think, that created this game, but it does support the GunCon, and it's okay. I mean, it's kind of just a Wild Wild West gallery shooter type stuff. Not the best, but this game I think was actually a budget title when it came out, and if so, that kind of explains the quality of it. And overall, supports the GunCon well enough, so nice to have. The next one is a licensed game. This one is Judge Dredd, and this one also supports the GunCon. So again, just kind of unusual to have some non-Namco developers that were making games that worked with the GunCon. Overall, if you like the series, the comic, the movie, all that kind of stuff, you'll probably be into this game. I'm not really a huge fan of any of the licensing, but does its job for being a light gun game. So nice to have that one as well. This next one is a compilation. So this one is Lethal Enforcers 1 and 2. This one is obviously another Konami title, so therefore it is designated to work just with the Justifier. If you liked all the Lethal Enforcers arcade games, this is probably the best way to play these. There were so many console ports that came before this on things like the Genesis, Sega CD, Super Nintendo, maybe even 3DO. I'm not sure if it came to that system. But regardless, if you want the best quality graphics and gameplay experience, this is probably the way to go. If you really were, a big fan of the old arcade titles from the early 90s. So nice to have those bundled together in one pack, and one of the more decent titles that is Justifier only. Next we'll look at Maximum Force. This is another one of the Midway arcade titles, and I've played this game in the arcade as well. I would say, compared to Area 51, I like this one a little bit better. It's got some really cheesy graphics in it, honestly, but plays alright with the Justifier gun. I don't think this one supports the GunCon. I'm pretty sure this one is Justifier only, and, again, just fast arcade action type title. Alright, next we're going to move into one of the most popular series of games that came out for the GunCon. This is the Point Blank series, and these are classics that only work with the GunCon as intended because they were Namco titles, first developed by Namco, which is the GunCon maker. Great collections of mini-games, and really just a good way to keep from getting bored with light gun games. So if you think about some of these other arcade titles, they're very linear. Once you've played them, you've kind of had the whole experience. Point Blank mixes it up nicely. You get just a huge variety of little mini-games, and just keeps it very fun to play in that title. I think this one has over 70 mini-games included, so a lot of time-based action, and you can mix up how the order plays and things like that, so it really keeps the title fresh. It should be noted that the Namco titles came also in big box versions. I know some of the big collectors like to have all the big box versions. I didn't go for that, honestly. At this point, I just don't have the space to store them all, and really just wanted to play these games. So for now, I'm happy with the vanilla jewel case versions, but if you really want it, there are deluxe big box versions that come with a GunCon as well that you can get these in. Next we have the sequel to that one. This is Point Blank 2. More of the same, but really just mixes it up again with some more good quality minigames. Graphics look a little bit better on this one. These were also arcade titles, so you can kind of compare how they stood up, because they were actually, the arcade versions were on PS1 hardware, so they really look good in the arcade, and very comparable on the home version. And then the final version was Point Blank 3. Has some really nice artwork on that one. Again, just more of the same, but if you enjoy wacky minigames and a lot of variety, these are perfect. This one had over 80, so they've even bulked up the amount that you get in the game, and really plays well with the GunCon also. Next, we're going to take a look at one of my favorites, and this one has a lot of variety of ways you can play it. This was an early jewel case title for the PS1. This is Project Horned Owl. This is the other game I referred to that was developed by Alpha System, just like Elemental Gearbolt. It has some really great artwork style in it. Even for an early PS1 title, I think they did a really nice job with the graphics in this game. Just the story mode is good. It's more of like a current or near future type of style era that this game takes place in, but this one supports the Justifier, it supports the mouse, and honestly it plays very well with the PS1 controller also. So however you choose to play this game, I think you'll enjoy it. And this one doesn't go for nearly as much as Elemental Gearbolt, but I think it's running the same game engine. It feels very similar as far as how it plays. So I think if you just want to get the experience of how these games work without having to spend the money for Gearbolt, this is a really good way to go. Next, we'll take a look at a couple other Namco games that they developed themselves, and these are really the last pieces of this subset. So we have the original Time Crisis. This was a very popular game, both in the arcades as well as, this was the launch game, I believe, for the GunCon in the US, and I would say they sold a ton of these. You see this game very frequently. Plays very well at the GunCon. The arcade had like a foot pedal that let you duck. So unfortunately, that's one thing that doesn't work as well with the GunCon. There were some third-party guns that included a foot pedal. If you really want that experience, that's an option. Ultimately, the original GunCon, you just use one of the action buttons to do the duck function, and it works pretty well. Then we have the sequel to that. This one is Time Crisis Project Titan. A little bit more polished to this one. Not as popular as the first one, I would say, but plays very well regardless. And if you play this on the controller, this one supports the DualShock, so you get a little rumble feature in with this. The downside to the original GunCon is there is no rumble feature, but it would be nice if they were able to build that into that or the Justifier. So that is really the full set of the PS1 subset, with a couple little exceptions I'm going to show you next. The first one of these is Silent Hill by Konami, and while it would be really exciting to support the Justifier throughout, unfortunately it doesn't. However, there is a nice little Easter egg with Silent Hill, is that if you plug in the Justifier to the system, when you have this game playing, it will unlock one of the guns in the game that you can use that has some enhanced abilities. So just a nice little Easter egg that you can use with Silent Hill. A lot of people don't realize that that's a thing, but I thought I would mention it just as part of the subset. The last game for the PS1, and then we'll move into the PS2 subset, is Bakukun, a Japanese Namco GunCon game that is absolutely hilarious and fun. Really enjoy this game, and I wanted to mention it because we didn't get this game in the US. Europe did, as the game Ghoul Panic, and I would say if you're able to play that one or this one, you're in good shape. This was a great arcade title as well. It was actually developed by Rising, which is primarily known for their space shooter games. So really unusual that they put out a GunCon compatible title, but it is a lot of fun. And I thought I would mention it as one of the Japanese exclusives, or Euro and Japanese exclusives, that is a good fit for your GunCon. So next we'll look at the PS2 titles that were exclusive to the GunCon II that came out in the US. This is a smaller subset. We didn't get as many games for the GunCon 2 as we did for the original GunCon and the Justifier, but there is some really good quality here, so I thought we would run through these also. First one of these is Dino Stalker. This is an offshoot of the Dino Crisis series by Capcom. Really, I think this game was released in Japan as a member of the Gun Survivor series. They actually did get some more games in Japan than we did that support the GunCon 2. What is kind of neat about this game is it does use the D-pad on the GunCon 2. It lets you do some mild adventuring with this game just to kind of advance the story. The game itself is okay. I would say it's not the best of some of the games we're going to take a look at, but it is very accurate with the GunCon 2. So nice little bonus there, the accuracy of that. One thing I should mention about the GunCon 2 is not only does it hook up to the video output just like the original GunCon, but it hooks up through the USB port on the PS2. So I don't know if that just frees up a controller port or gives it a little bit more accuracy, but seems to do the job pretty well. Next, we'll get into kind of one of the oddball titles that came out for the PS2 that a lot of people don't realize this is a GunCon game. This is Endgame, and this one is a non-Namco developed game. Is kind of a budgety type title. It was one of those games that runs on that renderware software that all have a very similar appearance. The story in this is, again, kind of like a near-future type apocalyptic landscape type game. It plays okay. If you can get over the graphics, the story's a little bit cheesy, but it is pretty accurate with the GunCon II, and I think this one actually supports the GunCon I on the PS2 as well, which is kind of an interesting feature, so thought I would mention that one. We'll get into a Namco-developed title. They obviously supported their own peripheral pretty well. This is Ninja Assault. This was also an arcade title. Absolutely love the graphical style of this game. Big fan of ninjas in general and kind of this feudal Japan era. Has a really great style. The sound in this game is also notable as being pretty unique. But the game will mow you down. It is no joke how difficult this game is. So I would always give that caution. Prepare to be humbled by Ninja Assault. Even in the arcade, this game was pretty brutal. So nice to play, but overall the difficulty curve could put you off. Next we'll get into another Capcom title. This is a part of the long-running Resident Evil series that I think a lot of people don't really realize is a GunCon title. This is Resident Evil Dead Aim, and what is kind of unique about this one is on the PS1 there was also a GunCon title in Japan, but when they brought that game here as Resident Evil Survivor, they took out the GunCon feature. I think it was due to it being, kind of around the period when Columbine happened. It just wasn't good timing to release a light gun game. So unfortunately that game only supports the controller. However, this, as kind of the unofficial follow-up to that game, does support the GunCon II fully. And honestly, it's probably one of my favorite experiences using the GunCon II. This one is much more heavy on the exploration than Dino Stalker, and you use the D-pad on this game, on the controller, very frequently, along with all the shooting scenes. Really got into this one. I've been playing it quite a bit, and I would like to actually beat this game. I'm not the biggest Resident Evil fan. Maybe the big fans of the series would poo-poo this game, but I think overall it holds its own very well, especially for a light gun title. So nice to have that one. Then we get into, again, some more spin-offs off the Time Crisis series. Obviously, those were some of the more popular light gun games on the PS1, so here come the sequels, both in the arcade as well as on the PS2. This was a very early PS2 release. I think it might have even been a launch title. This is Time Crisis 2, and overall does a nice job upgrading the graphics from what the PS1 games look like. Just more of the same arcadey style action, has some nice features to it, supports the GunCon well. Has some nice little mini games they added into just to keep the game going, so that you had a little bit more than just the arcade version to play. But a welcome addition to the series. This is my favorite of all the Time Crisis games. This one is Time Crisis 3. I think this one plays the best with the GunCon 2 of any of these titles. Really, the arcade action is even faster and more interesting in this one. The story's a little bit beefed up. This one also allows you to use two GunCon 2s at the same time, so kind of a neat thing that you can loop it all together and have two guns at the same time, or you can have a second player playing with you, also with a GunCon 2. They did release a big box version of this that came with two guns, so it kind of made it a little easier to get that setup going. But this one I would highly recommend as one of the best GunCon 2 titles if you're interested in getting into these. Then we get into the last one. This one is Time Crisis Crisis Zone, and this one came out after Part 3. It's kind of a spin-off game. It doesn't really follow the same flow of storyline as the rest of them, and unfortunately I think it suffers for that a little bit. I'm not sure if it had a different team developing this game, but it plays quite a bit different. It does continue the use of two GunCon 2s at once, which is kind of nice, but overall I don't really enjoy this game as much as Time Crisis 3. So not a terrible game, but overall a step down for the series. And then the very last one we're going to take a look at, this one is very unique in my opinion. This is Vampire Knight. And it does say Namco as far as who published it. However, this was developed by WoW Entertainment, which is a team that is part of Sega. And as you play this game, you're going to notice very quickly this runs on the House of the Dead 2 game engine. It is very much like House of the Dead 2, with some different storyline, different characters, but you will notice a lot of similarities in the stilted dialogue, in the presentation style, as well as how the game flows itself. As a big fan of House of the Dead 2, I highly recommend it. I think it's a lot of fun. It definitely has a little bit more comical flair to it than some of the more serious Namco titles. So overall, I would say this one is more of a Sega game than a Namco game, but Namco brought it out here and, of course, released a big box version as well. So that is about it. That is really the subset of the PS2 GunCon II games. The one game I haven't added to my collection just because I don't see myself using it is there's also Starsky and Hutch, a franchise I'm not interested in, but there is a way to play the GunCon 2 as the second player. The first player still has to use the DualShock 2, so ultimately didn't decide to grab that one, but that hopefully this gives you a pretty good overview of all the PS1 and PS2 Light Gun games as part of the subset. This was pretty fun to put together. I would say it's not the most difficult or expensive subset to get, but some of these games are a little bit difficult to find, so it's not completely easy either. If you're into these light gun games, I encourage you to check these out, and maybe I'll go after some of the Japanese and Euro exclusives next as a way to expand from here. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.